And you're watching Morning Express on this Monday, the 6th day of July 2015. It is time for The Way It Is. Joining us in studio this morning, Ambrose Weda, who's a lawyer. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Moses Kajwang, Homa Bay Senator. Ngilu Wambogo, who's a political analyst. And also Senator Mombasa County, Hassan Omar. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Let's begin with the illicit brew and the
crackdown.
Yes. The what?
Crackdown.
The clampdown, yes.
It's all right.
It was a texture. I've heard Michael laughing offset. This is what his influence is all about. Anyway, yes, so that has been going on for the last few days since the president made that announcement and directive at State House with the Central Kenya leaders. But the question has been, and I'll start this with you, Ngunjiri.
Should have started with the other guys.
I started with the other guys.
I'm directly.
Is he a consumer?
Are you affected by this? Let me start then with Ambrose.
Yes.
Ambrose, I'll put this to you.
Yes.
What did you think of the directive and what you've witnessed since then?
I think the directive was long overdue. It should have come 2 years ago. The country has actually sunk. It's not only in central Kenya. You go to Luoland, you go to Kisii, you go to... People have turned into vegetables because somehow people are allowed to manufacture, and the more conk, the more lethal it is. Alcohol full of formalin, full of all sorts of things, and to do this because we think that if you have the KEBS, is it KEBS, Kenya Bureau of Standards, if you have that paper that they put on top, then it is like it is from heaven. The crackdown has actually shown that the country, people have very dangerous chemicals which they call alcohol. I don't think it's crackdown on alcohol. It's crackdown on various poisons that are being offered to people. And this crackdown should be a continuous periodical exercise. Besides, I call upon Parliament to go back to the Assembly instead of posturing, especially the National Assembly, to make appropriate legislation that will regulate some of these wanton brewers and unfortunate drinking. Let us not make President Moi feel like dying when he sees the freedoms we have had and now everybody is sunk. It is something we should have come 2 years ago.
Okay. Kajwang.
Thank you, Sophia. The boldness of the president in declaring war on illicit drinks, I would laud that. However, the manner in which we've gone about it is less than perfect. We have seen cases where people are destroying legitimate businesses, businesses that have been registered by government agencies that are paying taxes. It all goes back to the old question of corruption. How on earth can someone be licensed by competent government authorities to produce liquor and brews that kill people? And secondly, we are also addressing the supply side factors, but not addressing the demand side factors. By clearing all the illicit alcohol in warehouses, are we addressing the demand for them? Are people drinking simply because these alcohols are available in the market, or there are some factors that are pushing them to go for these drinks? We need to address the demand side factors, the things and the issues that make our young people, instead of engaging in other legitimate business, they go into drinking. But we also must get to the root of the corruption that has allowed these illegal breweries to thrive in this country.
To thrive. Omar.
For me, my position on alcohol is very clear. I don't consume it. I make sure I try to, from the Islamic point of view, nobody else should consume it. There are real dangers upon why the Creator himself has outlawed this drink. So I think the ideal situation is that the nation has a drinking crisis. And I think partly what my colleague Senator Kajwang has talked about. There are factors that probably put people in this type of situation. I don't think anybody has decided deliberately to kill an entire generation of people. But that generation has also to be made economically active. And therefore there are a lot of factors that need to be addressed. So I think on the totality, I think Moi's State House was very commendable. Moi's State House never served alcohol. I think you're aware of that. So I think what happens is we need to also demonstrate a culture, particularly within the leadership, that you know we're practically
but
possible.
What does that have to do with the
We're
crisis
practically
that
possible.
is in the country?
No. You see what happens? You see when you leaders must not drink, those who drink in public. We must discourage social events so that then that way then we declare some kind of sacrifice against this whole vice of drinking, whether illicit or non-illicit. So that we control this. We have a drink. Kaunda,
so you're saying if the leaders
once,
don't drink, the country won't drink?
Kenneth Kaunda once wept about the drinking culture of the Zambian people. I think we need to curb the drinking culture. And what happens is, you see, when they were trying to fight smoking, Obama had to take a personal choice to stop smoking, so that it then was touted as something that was of a great achievement by the president. So what we are saying is that leaders, when they manifest themselves time and again in public places, where they look somehow also themselves tipsy and drunk, it literally consumes, creates a perception that this culture is fine. And therefore those who can't access, most of the leaders drink.
Yeah, which ones appear as you described?
Sophia, there's no point of driving that point home, but I think we all know. But that said and done, as we trickle down, as Senator said, Kajwang, we look at the causes, because there are people there who cannot afford these drinks, the one that are non-illicit. So we need to ensure that we get people out of this problem in its totality.
Bunjiri, the leaders should be a good example?
No, a couple of things. First, I mean, like Hassan Omar, I actually do not drink, though I'm not a Muslim. However, I don't agree with him that you can actually stop an entire country from not drinking, because some of us don't drink. Because the last country that tried to do that was America. And they had something they called a prohibition. And that thing completely messed them up. It took 20 years of a prohibition, created one of the most powerful criminal enterprises the world has ever seen. We cannot stop people who want to drink from drinking. What we need to do is make sure that what is available for them to drink is legitimate drinks that are not going to kill them. Now, what the president did by giving the edict about illicit alcohol, and it's specific, because I think some of us are getting confused. The president did not say that people should stop drinking. The president's war is on illicit alcohol.
Yeah.
And he made it very clear that we've got drinks that are messing up our young people. Of course, he's also concerned about the drinking culture that has got people drinking and getting drunk to the point there's an example that's been given so many times. I got to the point where even if it's not true, it's become legend, especially in Central Province, where he was walking and he stopped a guy and he asked him, "What can I do for you?" And the guy told him, "Mzee, just buy for me." It's called kahaf. Meaning to kahaf. And that tells you that we actually have a problem of our drinking culture, but then we also have a much more dangerous problem. Because the first problem is social. The second problem is criminal. We've got people who are actually brewing stuff that is killing people. Now that's what needs to be gotten rid of. Yeah. Now the whole idea of how it was done, for me, it was a disappointment, because first, I'm disappointed with some of the leaders who actually led this, because you have been a leader for a year, 2 years. You knew this has been happening. It took the president to tell them to go and get it done, for them to now go out and start having raids with media and all. I mean, that was not in at all. For them to then go and start destroying legitimate property. Again, I mean, I really, with all due respect to some of my friends here, there's some habits we should not be seen in Central. Yeah. Okay.
So the factors, that's one of the things that is mentioned by most of you in terms of, it's not just happening that people are drinking. There's something underneath that's fueling this. Right now, attention is on this crackdown. Yes. You're seeing a lot of people pouring the alcohol. And this say will go on for another few days as it gets this publicity. But after this story leaves the headlines, this story is, and the crackdown as well is likely to also just go underneath. So what is it that your take is that needs to happen to ensure that this is not just something that's happening now?
I've just said a few minutes ago that we need legislation instead of some people really looking at the
But legislation, how does that sort out a young man who says in Central?
There is legislation against these issues.
Now, let me tell you this. Alcohol is a problem, is a disease.
Right.
You needed to go to it's called Masaku 7, which was there last Saturday, where the children of who is who, you would see all the big cars and all of that. And it was, people go there to drink, and you could see big people, the children of big people. I passed there as I was going to church.
Okay.
And you could see people down on alcohol, accidents because of alcohol. So alcohol is a disease. It is not a question of somebody doesn't have a job and therefore he goes to alcohol. It's a disease. Then, because the disease is addictive, then now there are people who manufacture cheap poisons to take advantage of this problem. To deal with it, Moi dealt with it almost effectively through legislation. There was anti-alcohol law and all this. Then along the way, we opened the gates. One, Brew Busa, Brew Changa, Brew all these things. But because as a country we are sure we cannot test these things, we do not know. People take advantage. I know in my village, if the one where you add formalin, formalin, this thing used to preserve dead bodies. You add a bit of it to that, and people are very happy with that alcohol. Now, that is lack of control, that's lack of the law. So instead of members of the National Assembly here trying, these leaders, I feel sad when our elected leaders do not see the power they have, the power to legislate and to order various organizations to control, to put standards. That is the way to go. Then some of us will come and appeal to our Lord Jesus Christ to calm down now, because things are getting worse. So you leaders in Parliament, Senate, please legislate instead of posturing and thinking you'll get power through berating President Uhuru. Legislate and then ensure that legislation is there and it's effective.
So
then we'll also add prayers.
Do we have or can we put in place for this?
Sophia, there's really nothing about President Uhuru in this, and so Ambrose should rest easy. The certain cultures have had things like Busa and Changa and Mnazi over the years without modern legislation. The problem with Kenya is that we think we can write a law for everything. We think we can legislate even on moral issues. What is it that drives our young people to drink? If a young man has got a job where he's supposed to report at 8 and check out at 5, do you expect that he's going to spend his day in a drinking den, drinking cheap liquor? It is part of that. That is part of the demand factors, joblessness and hopelessness. We need to find a way of engaging our young people. Look at what happened in Mombasa when Kenya Ports Authority announced that it was replacing some workers who had gone on strike, which really was an illegality in itself. You saw the masses that turned up to be considered for very few positions. Every other year, when you're doing recruitment to the police, to the army, to the NYS, to teachers, thousands and thousands of young people. The Chief Justice said
10,000 people applied for jobs in the judiciary over their recent urged patience in the shortlisting. Yes,
so the level of joblessness and hopelessness in this nation is so high that if you are to come up with strategies to deal with it, probably that could be one of the most memorable aspects or legacies that President Uhuru could leave. I wish he could take that as a challenge. I wish he could take that as a legacy that he wants to leave behind. So whether we write laws, whether we legislate as a National Assembly or as a Senate, and remember, issues to do with liquor licensing have now gone to the county governments. It is not going to cure the moral problems that we have as a nation.
All right, so Senator, you also described that as a sham, what we saw unfold at KPA.
Yeah, as I said, first I want to concur with, Senator Kajwang. These are moral issues. No matter what kind of legislation, if there was one thing I agreed with President Moi, when we were doing a lot of these, we became too legalistic, is about some of the issues cannot be legislated. Issues about ethnic cohesion, issues around morality, those are issues that you can never legislate per se. So what you need to do is just to continue to take God's word where it matters and tell young people that drinking is a vice, they should stop. It is as pure and simple as that. We have a different kind of an issue in the coast region. We have drugs, hard drugs. We hope that crackdown also could extend to hard drugs, so that we can be able now to free the entire youthful population of this country from the kind of vices or the kind of potential destruction these drugs in its entirety combat them. But when it comes to KPA, I think the management has acted in excess of what is expected in terms of the response to industrial action. First, they carried a very mediocre response. I have already lodged a personal complaint with the Office of the Ombudsman, asking that the manner in which the advert was carried and the kind of losses that were occasioned on young Kenyans, because many people do not know that process was annulled. It was never announced to those young people. They were victimized, some were tear gassed, there were injuries, some fainted. It was a very sad scene. But just because we are exploiting on the soft underbelly of our Kenyan people, I do believe that there is no HR, human resource manual, that allows the type of advert that was carried, as if you're carrying out a recruitment drive for the police service, or even the police service or the military, stipulates the kind of vacancies that are available, the kind of qualifications necessary. Yeah. Here you just list and say, oh, people are striking, we are recruiting to replace them. You should have seen the advert. So I think in terms of that, it needs administrative intervention. There's no two way, somebody must be punished so that we forestall the exploitation of Kenyans to this extent. Secondly, I have never seen a country or an institution that expels 28 officials, all the officials of KPA, who are members of the union, which is legitimate, were dismissed summarily. And they were being evicted from their houses starting Friday. They receive a dismissal letter on Friday, they start the eviction on Sunday. I think there is something drastically wrong about how we are managing the affairs of some of our most important corporations in this country.
Okay. All right, the issue of unemployment, a big concern. The Jubilee government needs to be addressing itself too.
That's true. That's true. But I would like to take us back to somewhere. I think Senator Kajwang lost us.
Yeah.
Remember, we are talking about a fight against illicit alcohol. We're talking about we've got two, and I made this point in the beginning. We have two issues we're dealing with here. One is criminal, one is social. When we talk about a fight against illicit alcohol, it has actually a lot to do with, or a lot less to do with unemployment than it has to do with just bad criminal elements in our system. Because when we have what we actually are seeing, and part of the reason, part of what has got the president so upset is we've got alcohol, poison being sold under the guise of alcohol. And that is one of the things that we have to sort out. And you know, it's got many tiers of how it's done. People are getting licenses, and then you go and produce something different from what you give in at KBS. We've got a standardization problem. We've got an auditing problem of quality. We've got a corruption problem at grassroots for provincial administration. We've got a lot of things going on. We saw Mutudo with a bunch of KRA and what are they called? Those stickers? The stickers. Yes, that KBS stickers. So we've actually got an entire system supporting people selling poison that needs to get crushed. That's number one. The issue of alcoholism, again, is now where we start dealing with a sustainable social intervention that deals with how do you move people from that frustration. And then and one of the points that is interesting that somebody raised when I was up country over the weekend is that we've got a lot of people who are unemployed, including older people. You see, we have a situation where we're only talking about unemployment as if it's a youth structure. We have a large portion of people who are older who are also not employed. And also, we can't as a nation put the responsibility of employing all our people on government. The government, public sector has a limit of how many people it can employ. Because if it employs more than that, we're going to have these same guys who are in parliament complaining about how much money we are paying for our overhead, government overheads. So we also have a responsibility, especially the people who are leaders, to give ideas. Let's put some brain behind this. Right. How do we create space for people to actually generate jobs for other people? We can't just keep throwing stones all the time. We have a certain responsibility because, so President Kenyatta is going to be in power for 10 years and somebody is going to take over after that. This unemployment issue is something that goes way back. We have a population that we are always going to have some people who are getting out of. We are churning out graduates, churning out standard Form 4 leavers, standard 8 leavers every year in the millions. We have to figure out what we're going to do with them. It's a responsibility for all of us, especially the guys who are leaders.
We are not suggesting that the government should employ all the young people and the old people that Ngilu Abugu has talked about. The government cannot afford to, and there's no government that has employed all the unemployed people. But it creates the environment. It creates a conducive environment for private enterprise to thrive. It creates a conducive environment for entrepreneurship, and it is achievable. I think a government that puts its head and its mind in it can achieve it.
Okay. But this government has. Sophia,
but we still have the problem.
It's important for opposition. It's important for opposition in this country to do more than just criticize government.
What is it supposed to do?
I mean, really,
let us know.
Opposition, ideally, no, Hassan.
This kind of narrative.
Hassan, hey, can I finish?
This type of, but you've been speaking.
No.
This kind of narrative that is okay.
Hey, Hassan, I don't think I'm going to allow you to do that. Sophia, you asked me a question, and I answer it. Senator, please. Mheshimiwa, and I answer the question you just asked me. You've asked me a question. What is opposition supposed to do? In other countries, opposition is the government in waiting, except here. Here, opposition is about throwing stones at everything government does.
So what can they do?
For example, we are talking about the situation about how it can be created. He's just said it's supposed to create a conducive environment for business. It's supposed to create an enabling environment.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, they're doing a terrific job of doing that in 2 years. What else are they supposed to be doing that they're not doing? I wish that's what these guys were saying.
Listen,
but they're not saying that.
You say he cannot
so then
answer.
for them,
can I answer that question?
Just before you come there.
No. I have said
he can't answer.
They are doing a good job of creating an enabling environment.
So you're saying opposition should do less math.
Now, yes. For heaven's sake.
But so you see, I told you he has nothing. This is an ignorant narrative. That the opposition is not supposed to check government and to
that's not checking government.
To give what is called a counter view.
These guys don't check government.
What happens? You know this guy. I can tell you, but let's just leave
it.
But that's said and done.
We'll go whichever way you want us to go with Hassan.
An opposition, when you take up responsibility of government, you have promised all these job creations and all these type of things. So if people don't see a definite matrix of improvement, if anything, the tourism industry is collapsing for reasons more than just government inefficacy, but reasons of insecurity, etc. Then people will tend to go to government and say, please rein in insecurity so that our tourism industry can flourish again.
Now, first of all, let me say the senators delving into the KPA issues, which purely is administrative,
he's making a political position.
Cheap publicity.
Yeah.
Secondly, I prayed for you last Sunday that you get very civil language. I hope you will. Yeah. What the opposition needs to do now, the moment we talk about illicit brews,
to get a little more,
the moment we are talking about illicit brews or poisons, they have the power to legislate against those who brew these poisons. That it is within their power. They are not seeing that. They are seeing other things. Number 3, this unemployment we are talking about is not that grave. Why do I say so? People have gone to school and learned CRE, history, how Vasco da Gama came and went to Cape Ogutos and went to India. Others have learned geography, Mandera is dry and Kisumu is wet. What this country needs are technical qualifications. The organization which I head has vacancies for technical people. People who can do boilers, people who can do electricals, people in that process. The vacancies are there. You go into the medical field, where I come from in the village, we need nurses, we need clinicians, akuna, watu wamesoma personnel, people have learned personnel, and I thought that our legislators, the so-called opposition, would sit and say, let us look at the education policy, let us formulate appropriate legislation so that our people get appropriate technical skills that engender and improve our economy, so that when they come to the economy, so this talking and the yapping and talking,
please, Senator, let me bring in, please, this is my show, can I please moderate the show? I'm bringing in Senator Kajwang.
It is not true that there is inadequacy.
Senator,
enforcement.
today you are on a roll that needs
I
to
know
perhaps
you are
take a
fasting,
chill
so
pill.
hungry.
Senator Kajwang, he talks about issues around structures, that perhaps it's, yes, there's a question and an issue of unemployment, but should we also be looking at it in terms of many young people are looking to just be employed, that the entrepreneurship summit which is coming to Kenya, do you have people understanding that we can be the ones as well to be creating those jobs? The solution just one-sided as create jobs so we all go get employed? Should we also be looking at that environment, as you said earlier, but for more people to make these jobs, to employ other people?
So, Sophia, thank you. You know, Ambrose has talked about legislation, which I go back to the last point, that it is not for lack of legislation that we are where we are.
Absolutely.
But secondly, if you look at the composition of the National Assembly, Jubilee claims have got the tyranny of numbers. So when the challenge is thrown to legislators, it should not be seen as a challenge that is being thrown to opposition legislators. Right. The government also has their legislators in both the National Assembly and the Senate. So I think Ambrose's challenge should also go to Jubilee representatives in that house. Unemployment, Sophia, has not started today. But there are certain things that has made it worse. Tourism is dead in the coast. Leave alone these pictures, this narrative we see of some chartered flight coming in with half-naked German tourists. The reality is that a large number of hotels in coast are shut. And if it was not for government programs, if it was not for government seminars and local companies taking their people there, they would be dead. Go to Western. Mumias is almost dead. Mumias needed 10 billion shillings. It was given 1 billion shillings. That is not enough to revive it. Look at the agriculture sector. It is not growing as robustly as it should. By the way, the largest employer in this nation is agriculture. So we need to ensure that we focus on the areas, take a Pareto's principal approach, focus on the areas that can generate the maximum bang for youth employment. You've talked about entrepreneurship. I have said this before. Not every young man wants to be Chris Kirubi or Bill Gates. There are people who are content being the nurses that Ambrose has talked about. There are people who are content being farm workers and just being excellent at it. We should not think that the solution to youth unemployment in this country is to convert everyone into a business person. There are those who are just content being professionals and providing skilled or semi-skilled labor. Let us have some focus on agriculture. Let us have some focus on tourism. These are some of the leading employers in this country. And our people will not have to waste time. You know, the young guys sit ukomtani, some places called base. They just sit there from morning to evening, complaining about the economy, complaining about the country, simply because they don't have an opportunity to keep them gainfully employed.
Let's move this along to corruption. And Ngunjiri, I'll put this to you because there's been criticism on government about its commitment to fighting graft. That yes, this whole process that was set out by the president of the 175 list, that has led to a few people being charged, 2 CSs. You have 3 governors expected as well to be charged this particular week. You're taken as far as looking at it from 2 sides, that those in government argue they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. The opposition says this is purely just a lack of commitment, that it was government forces, or people working on the behest of government that got EACC commissioners out, getting the commission to limp. And on the other hand, corruption continues to be a big problem in Kenya. So how do you answer to that?
Sophia, you'll allow me to make one comment about the issue of employment as I go into corruption. We've got the opposition complaining a lot about unemployment, especially at the coast. Again, they're the same people who spend nearly every minute they get either talking to us or international community, telling them about how insecure our coast is, how badly a job we're doing as insecurity. While essentially what we're actually dealing with is a global menace of terrorism. But opposition talks about it as if it is our problem alone. So it's important for us to agree, if we're going to try and elevate, especially places that are vulnerable and sensitive, we need to do this together. You can't stand on one side and point and say those guys are doing a bad job. And then when you tell them they're doing a bad job and it affects the economy and the employment in that area, then you blame them for it. But then coming to the issue of corruption, my article today actually in the Star, I have actually put, again, the opposition on their defense, because out of 175 people who the president asked to be investigated for corruption, 117 have already been charged. It's actually not a few. You say, I also heard you say a few have been charged. Out of 175,
I meant a few high profile.
But you see, there are only a few high profile in that list. We had how many? 5 CSs. 2 of them are already in court. We had a few PSs. A few of them are already in court. So it's important to put the context, and this is a part that, again, I get really upset with the political opposition on this, because they focus on the quarter glass that is empty. They don't tell you about the 3/4 glass that is full. Because when you think about 117 prosecutions or 175, we're doing close to 70% prosecutions in less than 3 months. When we talk about the issue about corruption, and which is the point I was trying to make in my column this morning, we've had corruption in this plague in this country for the last close to 40 years. What has happened in 2 years? And it is important for us to remember that some of the people who are making the largest noises about corruption right now were in government less than 3 years ago, and they did absolutely nothing about it. People who have taken over government in 2 years have done substantive. They haven't done enough. The corruption war is not won, but progress has been made. Now, unfortunately, what we are hearing every day is, for example, the issue of Waiguru, NYS, which actually was a fraud case. CORD wants us to believe it was a corruption case. We have made, why? Because corruption is sexy. They're looking at Nigeria, they've seen Nigeria elections were run on insecurity and corruption. They want to make sure corruption is going to be an issue they can keep hitting government with. Unfortunately, it doesn't apply all the time.
What's the difference between fraud and corruption? And
my brother, you're a lawyer. You're a lawyer. No, let me explain. You just asked a very good question.
Let me finish. And if there's a difference, are we saying that fraud is a lesser sin?
No, it's not.
Kuna dhambi ndogo hapa Kenya?
No, it's not. You see what we're having, and this is what Senator has just done. He's just panicked.
Sure, you need to take control.
He's just, look at the guy who is talking about control. Look at the guy who's talking about, come on, Hassan. No, Hassan, no, I'm a guest here today, so allow me.
Is fraud a lesser sin?
Sophia,
let me take this to Hassan.
It's a we have penal code, and I know Hassan's part of Hassan's work. I've watched him on this show. Part of his work in this show is to make sure other people don't actually talk.
You people, time is going. Can we talk about
is to just
serious?
Let's go to the issue.
Time is running.
You released a statement.
Let me allow you to speak. Look at the guy talking about pettiness.
Can we get to the matter?
So what I'm saying, first I have to react to what Weda said. Whether, please, enforcement issues are different from sufficient legislation. Enforcement issue is different. My brother, you are the one who says that.
Give us the legislation. Which one?
You are the one who said Moi had put in sufficient legislation. So it is about enforcement, my brother.
Give us the current one.
It means, in fact, the alcohol control, it is there. Which legislation or which country would allow anybody to make illicit brew?
Give us the law.
Under what law are we enforcing this? It's not true. That enforcement is an issue.
Your
That's why
party leader over the weekend had this statement that he read. Please, let's move this along, Senator. We cannot function like this, surely, on the show. And one of the things that he called upon was, again, for CS Waiguru to step aside, and went on to say that there are people who are being protected and then those who are getting different treatment. Talk to us about this statement and what informed it that your party leader read out over the weekend.
You see, on one side, CORD is told to keep government on check, that the opposition needs to do its job. On the other side, when CORD does it, CORD is told that it's politicizing an issue. I think the corruption war, first and foremost, just to go into to respond to the security issue, we engaged the international community as the leadership of Mombasa. The British High Commissioner, who are the ones who published that advisory, the international community in its broadest formations. And when the British High Commissioner came at the very last end to ensure, to make his last sword, I think it is the engagement with some of the political leadership that partly informed the lifting of the advisory. So I think we are also quite keen on what our interests are as a nation. And therefore, let's stop this issue about thinking that we go to international community to tell them how security is run away just because it's politics. But secondly, in terms of what the opposition wants, is a very clear, transparent process of how we fight corruption. That it should have no sacred cows. It should be able to be, the perception of justice being seen to be done, and done across the spectrum of all those who are alleged. And I keep making this point, Sophia. One trigger by the Star newspapers. And it is important to put it that it's the Star that came up with the first trigger about the potential of over 800 million getting lost. And that trigger brought a series of other stories within the NYS that were bulleted by no other person than the Standard Group itself. The Standard Group almost ran a week of scoops and stories about the possible undercurrents in the National Youth Service and the entirety of the devolution ministry, about rations, about transfers, about standoffs, about power struggles. And therefore, the opposition felt that was sufficient evidence for us to call for an objective or an independent investigation to some of the issues that could be arising, because we are saying we are committed to the war on corruption. Corruption is fought when you demonstrate that you can lock your own brother. And that's why I keep making this pertinent point, that Muhammad Buhari ordered the arrest of his own brother-in-law on the basis of extortion. It's not a question of like and hate. When Muhammad Buhari first came into power, see, I told you this pettiness. When Muhammad Buhari first came into power, he ordered the arrest and prosecution of central bank governors, staff and governor, I think, who were alleged to have stolen what the monies that were supposed to be destroyed, and they diverted it for personal use. So I think corruption also must demonstrate that you're willing to fight it from those who are in the peripheral and those who are in the center.
So you're saying what's already happening is not sufficient. More needs to happen.
And I think more needs to happen from an institutional point of view that is fair, that is legal, that is constitutional, that adheres to the principles of natural justice.
I think one thing, the fight against corruption, we need to do more, and then we need to do less of politics in it. And you can see the president is clear about fighting corruption. These people who call themselves the opposition are clear in fighting certain individuals in that fight. For instance, they think if you sink Ruto and you sink Ngilu, then President Uhuru will be weaker, then they take over. We tell them that's not a good formula for getting power. The fight against corruption, they were given a list. Those who are in parliament, the president went there and gave a list of even his relatives and friends and said, look at this list. They put the list under the carpet, I think, chini kabisa. And they didn't want to discuss it. They have never discussed it. They became technical. Yet they are the ones who removed the EACC commissioners. A petition went to them. They looked at it very quickly, and they removed them. Then now, again, they want to put that to the president. The fight against corruption, I think we need to continue with it, but we need to give the president the full support. Parliament needs to give him the support, such that if an issue arises, like that's a national issue, they look at it. They don't hide it, and then they say, Mr. President, you are not being strong enough. But let us also not take in people like Ngilu, and then because we want to have a go at the president, we take those ones. That's confusing. Okay. And then if you take even it's not a question of just taking CS. We are just happy CS. Corruption begins from down, as they know the earned salaries which are not allowed by law.
Senator Kajwang, your party leader has over the weekend said there needs to be an audit. These monies that are going in terms to harambes are quite substantial, and quoting what he believes to be the income versus what is going out is. And Ruto responding and saying he's just being mean. What are your thoughts on that particular debate?
Sophia, that's a very good and timely question. First of all, let me address the double speak that has come out of Jubilee. One day they wake up and say that the president is not the one who fights corruption, it is EACC, and the president has got no job there. We must go back to the Constitution. The job description of the president is there in the Constitution. And one of the things the president must do every year is to address Parliament and the nation and talk about the progress the country has made in implementation of national values. One of the national values, integrity, transparency, accountability, and something called sustainable development. You cannot report on something that you are not responsible for. So let's debunk that myth that the president does not fight corruption. And I'm glad that Weda and Ngunjiri, in their utterances, they allude to the fact that the president really needs to take a role in that. Zero tolerance to corruption is something that is very appealing. When the president submitted the list of names after making a very good speech in Parliament, where we gave a standing ovation because we thought that he meant what he said, we looked at that list. And At that point, it looked as if there would be no sacred cows. If there was a minister who was hardworking, Charity Ngilu would be one of them. We saw what Charity Ngilu did with the lands registrar. In fact, despite serious opposition, even from we in CORD, saying that the National Land Commission is the one that is supposed to do certain things, Ngilu went around, and I can tell you, I was personally very impressed. I was not yet in politics or in elective politics by then. Ngilu was going to land registries, dusty places, messed up places, and digitizing records. How else do you define hard work? When it comes to Waiguru, we are told Waiguru is a hard worker, and that's why she cannot go away. What we are saying is that there should not be any sacred cows. The questions we are asking are not unreasonable. We are saying that we need a proper audit of NYS. We need to understand what its curriculum is, because it could be used for political radicalization.
But Senator, you said that, and your people were criticizing Ngilu at the time, in fact wanting now to strengthen Swazuri's office, saying that she's overstepping her mandate.
I
So
have just stated that I personally was not in elective politics, so leave me out of that. Ngunjiru Wambungu was in ODM in the last in the last government, and is one, you know, he got his epiphany moment. Now Saul has become Paul.
I was blind, but now I see.
But let me finish and let me address the question that you have asked about this lifestyle audit. And I said one of the national values is sustainable development. Is harambe a form of sustainable development? No. Harambe demeans even the people who are recipients, because every other day we go there as waheshimiwa in our big cars, and we are seen to be the ones doing the provision. We are like the ones bringing manna from heaven, and those people sit there. They're dependent. It is as if we are giving them small doses of cocaine every other day. It is a very dangerous approach to development.
Okay.
Well, Sophia, final point.
Yes.
The president does not do anyone a favor by coming with a bag of money to Bondo or any other part of this country and saying it is Harambe. It is a president's job to develop all regions of this country. The president remains with 85% of national revenues, and he should not be dishing it out as if he's giving us doses of drugs. He should do his job as a president to ensure that there's equitable and fair distribution of resources across the country.
Sophia, first, I think CORD generally and WIPA specifically needs to understand they're under no obligations. Actually, no, specifically CORD and ODM, they're under no obligation to do harambes. It is not a law. You do not have to do a harambe. If you don't want to do a harambe, don't do it. It is not, there is no requirement that you must do a harambe. So this thing about them getting so upset about harambes, I do not understand. If they have a problem with where the money is coming from, they can deal with that one. I mean,
Isn't that what they're trying to?
But you see, their problem is harambe. You see what he's saying? No, it's okay,
is it
boss.
sustainable?
It's okay. Even if I do a harambe once every 5 years.
It demeans the recipients because it keeps
Senator,
them hooked.
And the recipients, the one sometimes inviting these leaders for this church.
Yes,
and
because
Harambe.
this is kept in a
Is the problem not too
We have
This is
been
the
kept
problem.
in a wrap, and that's a wrap that we need to break.
We're Africans, We're Africans. We deal with issues communally. If you have somebody who is sick, you ask for help. If you have somebody who needs to go to school and you can't afford, you ask for help. If you're building a church or a mosque, you ask for help. These guys are telling us that we should not ask for help. And I don't understand. Maybe that is how they think. Maybe they don't want to help. It is okay. But then there's also something that I noticed, Sophia, that you asked. You asked Senator Hassan here a very specific question which he did not answer. His party leader did a statement this weekend where among allegations was that Jubilee did not win they got into power through a Supreme Court ruling. This is a lawyer. You know, it is an amazing, amazing statement to hear from a guy who was a vice president, that he believes that the government that is there won because are in power because the Supreme Court decided they're in power. It is an amazing statement. I would have loved to hear what the senator has to say about that. But even more importantly was his double speak in that statement. He seems to be supporting Ngilu and saying, you know, outsiders are being targeted. And then at the same time, he's saying the president is protecting insiders. So him, who we all know as a country doesn't like Ngilu very much, was in court when she was going to answer her case. Kamau, another CS who was in court. We never saw Kalonzo anywhere near that case. Monica, when Monica was being defended by the state, we didn't hear Kalonzo complaining that the state is defending Monica. Why? Because Monica comes from Eastern Province, because she's Kamba. This is the same guy who's complaining about ethnicity. These are the double standards that we are seeing from our opposition that just need to get stopped.
So talk to us about the statement. Let's begin with that, because I have
he didn't
it here.
answer
And one
that
of the
question.
things that, yes, that was said is that the government in place is just purely out of a Supreme Court ruling. So
yeah,
what is that?
I'll come to that. But you see, if also, when, you know, I like my brother Weda, despite the fact our disagreements, we realize that we have a mutual respect. And that's why sometimes I tell him not to throw half-truths. Weda just said here, we brought a list which we kicked out the commissioners. You have to realize, look at the committee, how it voted. CORD voted to retain the commissioners of the ESSC. Jubilee voted against it. And it was said there were undercurrents, that people were summoned to State House to return a certain decision. And these are all things that are in public knowledge. So I think it's not fair sometimes to throw it in such a manner as to peddle half-truths. But then that said and done, you see, there was a point at which George Bush, W. Bush, was simply preserved by virtue of a Supreme Court that was skewed in his favor. You have to realize the undercurrents. The Supreme Court did not admit a substantial amount of evidence from the CORD coalition. Number two, by Justice Ibrahim's own admission, much later in a public forum, when they were doing a review of the Supreme Court decision, he admitted that had they admitted that evidence, possibly their ruling would have been different. So nothing, when we say that we respect the Supreme Court, it does not mean we agree with it. You know, in fact, Willie Mutunga has been on record that there is nothing wrong in criticizing judgments of the Supreme Court. But ultimately, you have to respect the institution of the court. That's why immediately, even after we had disagreed with the Supreme Court vehemently, when there was a campaign to purposefully interfere with the Judicial Service Commission, another fake, what is it called, petition had been before the committee. It was CORD, it was Raila, it was Kalonzo who said, we will not allow the travesty to try and undermine the independence of the judiciary. So the fact that we might disagree with one issue does not mean we do not respect the court. So we respect the court, but we do not agree with them. And therefore, on account of that, even the revelations that came out later, by their own admission, by a Supreme Court judge saying, possibly, and they said it because the time was short, 14 days, it will mean that you now have to, these are some of the matters that were not, pleaded to. You have to have followed the proceedings almost systematically. And then for Justice Ibrahim to come and make that very adverse, in fact, it was a headline in most of the newspapers that particular day. So I think on account of that, it even puts a question of legitimacy to the judgment. So we don't agree with the Supreme Court's decision, though we respect it on account that they have that, that final arbitration role.
What do you say about...
Much in the same way, the National Assembly does not agree with the advisory by the Supreme Court on the powers of the Senate. But
so
they have to abide by it.
Your colleague here, Senator Kajwang, argues for Charity Ngilu in terms of hard work and all of that she's done, and that now it's being targeted. And we've seen your party leader being there to show support and implying that she's among those who are being treated as outsiders.
The party leader will not mind us saying that a day before, on Thursday, a day before Charity went to court, we had a NEC committee meeting. And that matter was discussed. I was one of those who was vehement. That Charity Ngilu has undermined the constitutional authority of the National Land Commission. He has rendered that commission impotent. And our referendum is still seeking to empower the National Land Commission. And therefore, there was nothing that stopped Charity. And then in that discussion, it was left to everyone to define their course of action the next day. I personally will tell you that I told the party leader that I do not think it's a good idea. But there were mitigations that his position was first and foremost as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. So if he's going to go on record. Number two, so therefore he has a duty in terms of his oath that they always take. And number two, he says Charity Ngilu was no longer being charged with that substantive issue about corruption. She was being charged with something like refusing to obstructions. Number three, Charity Ngilu made very adverse allegations against the presidency. She came out of that revolving door, as they like to call it in the Jubilee coalition. She came out of that revolving door and said Uhuru is privy to President Uhuru for
His Excellency.
President Uhuru is privy. Is privy. You know, sometimes when you're in a discussion, you tend to... So
you're saying you
President
disagree
Uhuru is
with your
privy
party
to the
leader?
Waitiki issue.
So your party leader is aligning himself to Ngilu, not because, according to you, she has in one or another undermined the NLC,
because he's
but
a lawyer.
because he's a lawyer.
No,
That's
no.
what you say.
First you said he's a lawyer, then the mitigations. Look at it. Charity Ngilu got out of the revolving door in the ESCC. And that's what even the coalition tends to, you know, raise the eyebrows on and said the Waitiki issue have been summoned for. Uhuru is privy to this information. So what he was in a sense saying, that I'm not the one to blame. So that therefore, in a certain way, therefore, then people feel that then this whole matter was pursued in a manner as to profile that particular minister.
Three things. I
Cabinet
think
Secretary.
the party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, in his usual good way, was trying to pass through the middle.
Katikati yao.
Katikati. That's what he was trying to do. Today this, today that. That is one. Two, my professors, Dr. Meroka, Jaramba, and Professor Sihanya, would blame me if I don't correct you. Sustainable development is not a development that you do today and tomorrow. Sustainable development is using the current natural resources to meet our needs today without compromising the needs of the future generation to meet theirs. You get that?
I will
Three.
respond in time.
We judge leaders by their character. Raila Odinga, Prime Minister, is not known to contribute to any harambee. He's not known to be pro-development. He's good at fighting for democracies and then propaganda, those two. So when Deputy President Ruto, Mheshimiwa Ruto, donates $1 million shillings, I'm not a rich man, but if you call upon me to donate $1 million, I will ask you and Senator here and Joho from Mombasa, and I'll have $1 million. So to look at $1 million and then to start saying, oh, he did this, Deputy President Ruto contributed too much, that is because the leader himself, who I believe is a billionaire, would find so much. What the Deputy President did was the correct thing to do when it comes to churches, when it comes to certain institutions. To go against him and say this is corruption is actually typical of a leader who doesn't want to give you even 10 shillings and call that 3. Number 4, it is upon the National Assembly and Senate to take their legislative powers to help in the appropriate legislation that fights brews, that fights corruption, that fights all these things. This political posturing should come to an end so that we unite as a country and move forward.
All right.
Sophia, the Senate has recently passed the public fundraising bill sponsored by Professor Nyong'o that seeks to regulate the manner in which you conduct harambes. Ngunjiri talks about us not wanting to do harambes. I've just come from the village where I presided over 4 fundraising functions.
Oh, you're doing harambes. There's a
and let me tell you, we are doing fundraisers because of the failure of government. In 2 cases, schools where dormitories were raised down, we had to be called. You call parents who are having a problem even paying school fees for their children, and you call them back to build a dormitory when they've not even completed their school fees. Harambe is part of us. It's part of our culture, but it cannot be Jubilee's development agenda. You know, in the same article that Mujiri talks about in the Star, where he says he wants to be MP for Kandara,
no,
he's now
not
the head
Kandara, Nyeri, boss.
of Kandara Former Alcoholics Association. Someone has also asked that we need to understand what is Jubilee's development agenda, what is Jubilee's development vision. Vision 2030 died a long time ago. What we are seeing now is that Jubilee's development agenda is hinged on one thing: loot, then take it to public events, call it Harambe. What we need to see more of is not Ruto coming to Bondo and giving 3 million shillings. We want him to come to Bondo and address issues that are endemic, issues that have plunged that region into perpetual poverty. That is much more sustainable, and the definition given by Ambrose Weda, using natural resources, yeah, that's what we want Ruto to do. Come and look at the lake and ensure that we sustainably develop those areas instead of giving us handouts that will leave us calling for more.
I first want to applaud my brother for participating in a Harambe. That is I mean, that's good movement.
And I use my salary, not proceeds from the office of the president.
You actually know that. How do you? No, I don't understand.
Not Monica
I don't
Juma's,
understand.
not
See, this is what I don't
Monica
understand.
Juma's account.
This is
The
what
court
I
leader
don't.
will chuck him out.
This is
for
actually, I think
participating
he'll
in
get fired.
harambes.
But this is what I don't understand. We all know that, for example, Uhuru Kenyatta gets what, 2 million shillings. We know that he most probably has more money than all of us here combined, even before he gets that 2 million shillings. We know that most of his expenses are catered for by government, in addition to this 2 million shillings. When he goes and gives 1 million shillings or 2 million shillings a month, and then somebody starts complaining that he must have gotten it from some office in the office of the president, and then they don't substantiate it. You see, these are the things that my brother Weda is talking about propaganda. Spin. We just saw Hassan Omar here, Senator Hassan Omar, spin the entire statement that his party leader gave. He went to court because he's a lawyer. Come on. Weda wasn't in court. Weda is a lawyer. I mean, really, for heaven's sake.
They just did the wrong things. They didn't know how to prosecute.
They needed, we must run away from trying to spin everything. The issue of harambes, we are building churches. 2 weeks ago, it's Nyeri. The Kandara I'm talking about is in Nyeri town constituency, where we will be speaking about my interest later. 2 weeks ago, the deputy president came to St. Peter's Church, which is the church I grew up in. We are putting up a structure that is nearly finished. And he contributed 1 million shillings, and I think he had gotten 500,000 shillings from the president. And we raised 7 million shillings in that church on that Sunday. So really, this issue, if these guys do not want to contribute to harambes, it is okay. Let the rest of us who want to contribute.
Let me tell you, let me say this. I don't spin anything. I've been in this.
This one you span.
I have been in this. Kalonzo said it in his own averment that he will attend the proceedings partly as a lawyer. But number two, also partly to show solidarity. It's not in contest. Sometimes lawyers go in record. You see 30 lawyers. We used to go 30, 40 lawyers in a matter. Not because everybody will prosecute the matter, but others will come as a matter of solidarity and get on record. Even the Security Laws Amendment Act was prosecuted by only one person, but about 15, 20 lawyers were on record. That's part of the legalese that people do in terms of preventing pressure on
publicity.
But now that's said and done. PR is a gimmick which is specialized by the Jubilee regime. You see, we've been real for the last 15, 20 years, my brother.
Okay, please finish.
The assessment has been there. But they miss the point about harambes. African culture by nature is philanthropic. We were bred in a culture philanthropic. And the African culture also says that there is prudence in the left hand not saying what the right hand is doing. There is no honor in poverty. If you want to assist somebody to do something of public good, I was educated by people who have never proclaimed it on a public stage, neither have they sought political office. The whole principle about harambe and philanthropism, the why we have the regulation, is to avoid political manipulation of the industry. It's an extraordinary industry, and we needed to preserve the sanctity of that industry. Harambe is our national motto. It's our national creed that we will pull together. That's what harambe means. So what we don't want to do is this spin, for lack of a better word, is this spin to make harambe now a philanthropic act to demonstrate your leadership. Harambe is no gauge for leadership. The quantums of money you pour is a manipulation of the poor. So we want to preserve the sanctity of that philanthropic industry that is part of our ingrained African culture. We have all grown through philanthropy. As I was in Mombasa, my relatives, everybody was saying there are things that we need to do. That's how we grew up, and that's what we will continue to do as an African society. We are philanthropic by nature. But that does not mean you go and you start churning out 3 million to show that you're so philanthropic. Why couldn't you do it in other means? In fact, there's honor in leaders doing these things in a manner that also meets the qualifications of divinity.
Okay, Hassan Omar, Mombasa Senator, Ngunjiri Wambogo, who's a political analyst, Moses Kajwang, a Homa Bay Senator, and Ambrose Weda, who's a lawyer. Thank you all for joining us, and that is the way it is. It is now 8:16 a.m. We take a short break. When we return, Michael Gitonga, my co-host, will be taking over with an inspirational chat this morning, and you'll meet a lady who struggled with infertility through 3 marriages. How is she faring now? That's coming up right here on KTN.